Hey everyone, this is Iggy again, and this is part 2 to my other tutorial. I just wanted to kind of go over some of the functions in Bodypaint, and now that you guys know how to set up a model that has multiple maps, I kind of wanted to go further in explaining some of the functions that are actually in Bodypaint and how to use them. So to start off, what you're looking at is actually a file that I have saved, which I work from. So whenever I need to do seams or add things to the texture, let me get rid of this real quick, I can just quickly access this file and open it and do what I've got to do. So V4 here is actually posed very differently than how she comes out of poser in default, and this is because I've pre-posed her for this exercise. Um, Basically her legs have been spread and her toes have been spread so that I can access the seams a little bit better. The seams are typically between the legs and across the thighs and in between the toes. So this gives me better access to fixing those areas as I need to. Also, you'll notice that there are a bunch of these little star-looking things in my scene, and these are actually lights, which you can see over here. I have quite a few lights set up in the scene. And what this basically does is it illuminates V4 so that I can see the seams better on the maps. So if you want to add lights to your scene, I'm just going to demonstrate real quick for you. All you need to do is click this light looking icon and it opens a whole entire panel of lighting options. So I'm going to go ahead and add one, and it's added it right here at the top, and you can move it around, pan it up or down wherever you want it. Also, if you look on the attributes panel, there are a bunch of options to change its functionality. You can have omni light, spotlight, infinite light, area light, and change different settings like the shadows and the visibility and whatnot. But we're not going to do that for this exercise because we're not actually setting this up to render. We're only setting this up to use for body paint. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that light that I just added. And I'm going to switch from start out layout to body paint. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to enable my projection painting. Oops. And enable my textures. As you can see, I have no textures loaded quite yet, so she's just kind of a white mass. So I'm going to go ahead and use the textures for Vermilion Dawn this time, just for a switch of pace. The torso in. Also note that when you load a texture in, this is going to give you a little warning or whatever you want to call it. And it basically says, this image is not in the document search path. Do you want to create a copy at the document location? You can hit no or yes. It just basically means that you won't be overwriting any of your main files if you're working off of your main texture folder. I just click no. And finally, let's load the limbs. There. We go ahead and enable all of these. Now once again, this texture actually doesn't have seams on it because it's already been released, so the seams have already been fixed. But I did want to kind of further explain the clone tool a little bit better, since in my last video I kind of didn't explain it that great. So basically, when you first click the clone tool, you're going to get a little eyedropper tool. And what this does is picks an area on the skin to clone. As you can see, it's cloned that entire area and that birthmark as well. But say you want to specify a different area after that. Let's find a different area that we can use. Here's another birthmark. All you need to do is use the Control key on your keyboard and then click the area that you're wanting to use. And then you just clone it. Also, you have to be careful. You can see that there's a line right there. That basically means that you've hit the bottom of the screen and it can't go any further. So you just kind of have to either fix it or pan out so that you can get a wider range of area to clone from. Pretty easy. And you'll use the cloning tool a lot, especially when you're trying to deseam things. Another thing I wanted to demonstrate in this video is how you can not only deseam a color map, but you can deseam a bump map at the same exact time. So if you're the kind of person that sets up your maps and your bump maps before you get to the deseaming part, you can actually deseam both at once to save you time and frustration. Oops. So you just go in here and you load your bump maps. There's the torso. And there's the legs, or the limbs, whichever you want to call it. And it did not load. Oh, that's because I loaded it on the wrong file. Hee hee. Oopsie. And now there's the limbs. So what this has done is basically you can see in the image that it's not nearly as smooth. It actually has a bump now on it. So if you're going to want to clone both the color and the bump at the same time, all you have to do, well, you can also switch between them as I'm doing here, but you have to hold the Shift key and click the bump to do both at once. So now I'm going to demonstrate by cloning this birthmark once again and show you how it not only clones the color map, but it also clones the bump map at the same time. Also, to apply your projections, you can do one of two things. You can either move, which will actually apply it. Let me show you. And keep an eye on the bottom left corner. It'll actually show you that it's applying the projection. Or you can alternatively clone and then use this button with the check mark. And that does the same exact thing. I never really use the check mark button just because I move around a lot in here and I don't really see a purpose or a need to use it. So I always just kind of scroll when I want it to apply. Also, as stated earlier, you can't just save as to get the texture out. You actually have to save the texture separately after you've actually done something to them. So I'm going to go ahead and clone this. Oops, that looks yucky. Apply my projection, and then I'm going to go ahead and show you how to save them out from here. What you have to do is you have to right click on the maps, go to texture, save texture as, and you'll notice that in here there's a bunch of different formats that you can actually save your texture as, including Photoshop file or PSD layer for when you have layers that are enabled on your texture map. But for now, I'm just going to save it as a JPEG, and I'm just going to quickly save it to my desktop. And note that you have to actually save both the color and the bump map. because you've actually changed both. Now, I want to demonstrate how to add a new layer. And what that's going to do is, you see it's added a blank layer. And another one there. Now you want to actually click on the layer itself. And we're going to, let's pick gray. As if we're going to do a tattoo. Okay, so now that we have our new layer in there, and we've selected both the color and the bump, you don't have to use the bump for this, but since it's already in there, oops. Okay, oh, derp. Helps to have both set up. Let's just use the color for right now. We're going to go ahead and paint. Once again, my favorite color is teal, so I happen to use it a lot. And if you want to see, that's not working. Why is that not working? Ah, that's why. If you want to make this invisible, all you have to do is click over to layers, and then you see the little eye icon. You just click it, and it goes away. In theory, it should work over here too, but it's not for some reason. I don't know. So once you're done painting, and if you want to retain your layers, you're going to come over here once again. Oops, it's applying the projection. There it goes. Now it's working. You just go to texture, save texture as, and then this time you're going to choose a Photoshop layer. This will actually save it as a PSD, so if you open it in Photoshop, you still have access to the layers. And also note that if you have, if part of your drawing or painting exceeds over an area, see, as mine has exceeded the hip actually, because it's on the limbs too, then you also have to make sure that you save these other ones as well. Now I actually haven't added a layer to my skin leg, but this is only for demonstration anyway, so I'm not really worried about it. So let's just turn that back on. Now I also want to show you guys what happens if you don't have this button enabled, because it's happened to me on many occasions and it's very weird and frustrating when it happens to you and you don't know what's going on. What this basically is going to do is turn off your projection painting, and if you look, you see how it's showing you where the seam is. It won't go past the seam. This is what happens when you don't have a projection painting enabled. The seam is pretty obvious, and it's really hard to use in this mode because it's looking at the map more specifically than it's looking at the texture that you're actually cloning from. So you definitely want to always enable the projection painting so that you have a smooth transition over your seams. And you can see from the cloning tool that when you clone, oops, and you actually have a layer, it clones underneath the layer. Your layer remains untouched and unharmed. Now, much like Photoshop, Bodypaint has a lot of the same features. One of them is filters. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to use my little drawing, and I'm going to show you. Oh, wait a second, I'm on limbs. Filter. Hello. And I'm going to show you how this works. It's going to basically pixelate my map. And you can see the filter applied and stuff. So you can do lots of neat things to really get creative and make your textures look one of a kind. And there should be a way that you can use the filter on the layer itself. And as you can see, it's done just that. Note that it's not going to be seamless, though. I've truly and utterly messed it up. So how are we going to fix this? Well, we're going to use the smudge tool, and we're going to take the pressure off a little bit, and then we're just going to basically smudge it around, and that's probably still too heavy. The smudge tool is actually another tool that I use a lot when I'm de-seaming, as long as I can do so and retain the quality of the texture itself. And it's getting the bump in there, so I'm going to turn the bump off for right now. And this shows you basically how you can use the cloning tool on a layer to make something seamless there. It's a tricky process, and you just kind of have to mess with it. And that looks like crap. Anyway, you get the point though. Another thing that I wanted to go over in this tutorial is brushes. You have a metric ton of brushes that are at your disposal. Some of these come with Bodypaint, and others you can get for free from different communities. Now that just applied to my smudge tool, but I want to apply that to my actual painting tool. And you can see that it does the same exact thing as Photoshop does when you have a specific special brush applied to your brushes. There is also a way to use your ABRs or your Photoshop brushes and import them into Bodypaint. You can get some really neat effects with this. Unfortunately, I'm not going to cover how to get the Photoshop native brushes in here because I actually haven't done that. I pretty much just use what's at my disposal, and for the most part I texture in Photoshop. So I have a tendency not to use pre-made brushes in here. Another thing that I wanted to show you is how to use layer modes. Now, if you've used Photoshop, I'm sure you know that certain things can be controlled on a layer, like the opacity, as I'm messing with here. So you can turn down how brash something is, or turn it up. And similarly to Photoshop, you also have blend modes. So let's turn on multiply, and you can see that it changes how the painting looks on the layer. Screen, overlay. So messing with layer settings is also another good way to get a good effect going for your layered out painting. Oh, that's cool. Let's just turn this back to normal for right now. And I'm going to turn off my layers for right now. And then you can see that I kind of went over my boundaries. But for this next step, I'm going to demonstrate the dodge tool, because sometimes you want to use the dodge tool to illuminate certain features of the body. Oops, I'm still on my layer. Like if you want to paint in highlights. And just like Photoshop, there's different modes that do different things. I'm going to demonstrate them all. You can see there's a difference in the way they paint, and then this one's highlights. And you can change the exposure so you can tone it down or make it stronger. Let's tone it down. And this is really good for kind of baking in highlights. Alternatively to the dodge brush, there is also a burn tool. And this one I actually use more than dodge because I like to paint shadows on textures to give it a little kind of more realism. And just to demonstrate what I mean, her backbone here would naturally have a shadow in it. So you can kind of paint a shadow in to demonstrate further where you would use the shadows underneath the breast area. You can also, this isn't the neatest job I'm doing over here, but this is just for example anyway, but you can also kind of paint in abdominal muscles if you know kind of how to paint that stuff in. And then you can alternately switch to the dodge tool and kind of help define where highlights would naturally hit as well as shadows. And you can just kind of mess with it and add some shadow to her collarbone or add some highlight. I actually like to use these a lot when I'm doing character textures because it kind of adds a little something to them. And it's much easier to do it in Bodypaint than it is to do it in Photoshop because you can actually see what you're doing and you're already making it seamless when you're working in here. So that's really, really helpful. Now for the last thing I'm going to show in this tutorial, that would be how to add a font. Actually, yes, you can add fonts in here just as you would in Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add text, and I'm going to choose let's just use this weirdo font. And I'm going to click, and you see how it put text there. But I don't like text. I'm going to change it to say Iggy, and then I'm going to change the size of it, and then I'm going to click. And now she has a cool Iggy tattoo because, you know, everybody wants one. And you can add that pretty much anywhere you want. Let's add it. Oh, it doesn't want to go to the middle. And there, she has a cool Iggy tattoo now. So you can pretty much also use wingdings or web paintings or whatever you want to call them. Basically fonts that are made up of pictures to add little things, like stars, for instance. If you want to do a tattoo, you just have to be careful what fonts you use because some of them are not for commercial use, and you need to make sure that you check that before you use them for something that's intended commercially, just to be on the safe side. So that pretty much covers this tutorial. I hope you had fun, and I hope I see you next time. Bye!